it's just such a hard question. I mean, I wouldn't want to take anything away from the true culture-based companies that are really, they're doing the right things by employees. Their leadership believes that it's going to be a big happy family forever, and that everyone's going to walk off into the sunset with millions of dollars. And you know, I want to believe that. I wanted to believe that when I was at MBA. I never wanted to leave. I kind of thought I was going to be a DuPont guy. 32 years later, I'd walk out with the golden egg, and you know, I'd have a big BMW and a beach house and a yacht. But it didn't work out that way, and so I think my view is a little bit different than it used to be. I think that the true loyalty now is going to be to, you know, I think if young people, particularly getting started, can get with a small entrepreneurial company, and I think there can be loyalty and learning built there. I think, but there's risk with that. So I think big companies, if I walked into Bank of America today, I would be lost. I would not know what to do, because I would be a number, and I can't operate like that. So for me, it was worth liquidating my life savings to start a company, because I'm not a number anymore.
What would you say the risk is by being in a small entrepreneurial company? You just made a comment of, do you think it's good to potentially jump into a small company like this, however you feel that there's potentially some risk involved by throwing your whole heart and soul into a small business like that? What do you see as the risks, other than the fact that the company could go nowhere in a few years?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, this is probably not fair of me to make this example, but you know, I think of Steve and Wes when I think of that question. Steve was my intern 3 years ago. And now look at this. I mean, so I'm very excited for those type of situations. The bottom line is that we could all sit around all day and realize that 96% of companies won't make it past their first year. Or very young, we can decide this is the time I really should be taking the risk. A lot of my friends thought I was completely insane for starting a company. You've got 2 kids, you've got that big house out in Landenberg, you know. And I just said, you know, I think if I don't take this risk, the risk is that I'm going to get acted upon again. So truly this concept of the downsize, redefining business, I think it's all of us taking control of our situations again. And I think I'd rather be in control and assume a little risk than not be in control and really be at risk. That's the best way I can say it. I mean, I think there is risk, but hell, there's risk going to Bank of America.
Right.
I think that's a philosophy I have, that when I was working for AstraZeneca in particular, but it could be any company, you go in every day not knowing if it will be your last. And when you're starting on something on your own, no matter how small it is or how big you grow it, you don't wake up thinking, today could be my last, because it's your enterprise. And I think there's a lot of peace of mind that really enters your mind when you're looking at that checkbook that you don't have when you're at someone else's mercy. And that's the nature of, I think, that's the nature of the economy now. If you're working for an organization, you're working for somebody else, you're always at risk.
Right. Well, talking about risk, then, is risk generational to you? I mean, do you think that, particularly like 50-plus people who now center out in the street, they already have sort of a work legacy that's going on there, you know? In some ways, you can kind of flip it and say, wow, what a great opportunity now, depending on whatever it is.
Right.
But or for a person who's just coming out of school, or maybe a person in the 30s now, risks would seem to vary. But how would you handle that? How do you deal with that in terms of, you know, kids that are just going out, or all of us?
Well, I think potentially, you know, a financial advisor would tell you that, you know, all of us have a risk profile, right? You know, do you want equities? Do you want bonds? What do you want? So I think risk is associated with personality type. It's associated with age, potentially. Geography can have an impact on the risk that an individual can take in their career. You know, I think a lot of people being able to break out of a self-imposed kind of cage that they're in is getting past whatever those barriers are and, trying to move out of that. Unfortunately, some people put so many constraints on their next move that it's really impossible for us to kind of open up the doors of their mind to creating a portfolio career or, doing some nonprofit work and doing some consulting. And so I think it's different for every person. I don't think there's an easy answer to that one.
Do you feel nervous? Do you feel empowered? How do you feel like this whole thing?
It's a funny question. The first 3 months, I felt amazing. It didn't even matter whether I was making the money or not. I felt like I kicked down the door and I was in control of the universe. And just like I felt when I left MBNA. And then I started to have these kind of nightmares and things, and, what have I done? And then I kind of was having this inner monologue of, I can't really tell you what I was thinking because it's not really clean. I kept saying to myself, something along the lines of you're an absolute loser if you allow your mind to keep staying in this negative loop about this being successful. And I just said to myself, there are no other options anymore. This is it. And once I kind of made that mental commitment to driving forward, the decisions I had to make the next steps, my friend and entrepreneurial coach said, you're going to reach many inflection points along this journey, and each inflection point is going to require you to make a bigger commitment. And he was really good about saying, I was like, well, what if we don't get this contract and cash flow's not looking good right now? And I said, what should we do? What should I do? And he's like, reinvest. I'm like, well, that's easy for you to say. It's my money. And he's like, do you want the dream to live or do you want it to die? He's like, hang on longer than you think is possible and you'll surprise yourself. So it's good to have somebody kind of pushing your confidence a little bit like that. But once I started to make those commitments and really to act upon my kind of mental energy to move forward, it wasn't as scary anymore.
That's great.
Who is your entrepreneurial coach, and did you pay him?
That's a good question. My entrepreneurial coach is Chris Burkhardt. He's the CEO of CBI Group, former president of Placers, which was a big Wilmington company that sold to Randstad. CBI has been around since 2001, and Chris is a serial entrepreneur, and his family is too. They have multiple businesses. Their family owned Kitchelines and Klondike Kate's, and so they've had a lot of experience. They own a garbage company. They're all over the place. But it was funny, when Chris and I first started talking, he kind of put a contract in front of me and said, this is what I charge for entrepreneurial coaching. And I said, well, I'm not paying that. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I want your help, but how about you help me through this process and we'll work out some other revenue sharing arrangement. And I said, if you want me to put faith in you, you've got to take risk too. And he said, let me think about it over the weekend. And he said, okay. So we have a nice revenue sharing arrangement, which is fair to him and fair to me. So it's called there. I said no.
We have about a minute left. Chris, I don't want to stop you because I know you can keep on talking, but you give out some. I just want to give you a chance to go explain what you handed out tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, go.
Okay, yeah.
There's just a couple of things, and one of the questions that you had on the list was, how did we get started and that kind of thing, and all I put together was some information on our values as well as how we developed the model of outplacement. We have a flexible outplacement model. And as you think about the outplacement business over the last 20 plus years, when it first started in the 70s and 80s, it was this traditional bricks and mortar kind of business with with classes and all that type of stuff. And now today you've got a lot of upstart technological providers that are coming into the marketplace, leveraging Web 2.0 and saying, hey, we could be a great provider for $295. Well, at the end of the day, both of those models are kind of at the end of what we think the reasonable spectrum is to have positive client relationships. So on the old model, they've had to severely impact the adjunct to client ratio to manage their expenses. So, you know, coaching, there's one career coach for maybe 50 to 60 people. I had one client whose career coach was out in Chicago and their job development person was in North Carolina. And so when you're dealing with those kind of situations, it's hard to have relationships. So they had to manage the expense somehow. They got all the buildings and all that stuff, and they got all the fancy materials, so they got to find some way to manage the expense. On the other end of the spectrum, there's a cost to relationships when you got these slick Web 2.0 models. Yeah, there's lots of good technology, but it's at the expense of the relationship, so we're somewhere in the middle. That's our positioning. And then there's a couple other things. One of them is a value sheet, and the other is just information about our firm and some ways to connect with us. So,
Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate it.